Dealing with the homeless problem in San Francisco or any major city requires compassion. It also requires a certain amount of responsibility, but it also brings into question probably one of the biggest civil rights issues of our time, that of individual rights versus societies. And joining us this morning is State Senator Scott Wiener, who has introduced a bill to change the state's laws regarding requiring people to get treatment. And that's one of the issues we have here. We spend $300 million a year, for example, in San Francisco on trying to help the homeless. We have a number of programs. We have a number of compassion. But what to do if someone is too mentally ill to go and get treatment?
Yeah, it's a really hard problem, and I think it's important to keep in mind that the large majority of homeless people are not incapacitated. They're able to make decisions for themselves. If they get the right support, they can be helped. But there's a small percentage of our homeless population, probably about 1%, maybe 100 people in San Francisco, who are absolutely incapacitated due to drug addiction, mental health issues. They can't make decisions for themselves. They are unraveling and dying on our streets, and it's not progressive to let them do that. And our current legal tools at the state level, in terms of getting people off the streets, even if they are not consenting to it, into conservatorships, are very, very narrow, and we can't use them on these folks. And so that's what we're trying to do, update the law to reflect the reality.
Well, I would say that there's more than 100 in San Francisco. I can walk down Mission and Market Street on a Friday afternoon, and chances are I'm going to see, if not people completely incapacitated, people urinating or openly shooting drugs on the street. Now, they might not be to the point of totally mentally ill, but there is that question of how do you take people that choose not to seek treatments, choose not to take programs, and get them? They might, like he's walking down the street or shooting up right in public. How do we deal with that?
Yeah, well, we can.
Is it possible, really, you think?
It is. It is. The county can conserve someone, which means that person under our law is not able to make the decisions for themselves, has been getting, for example, 5150'd a lot over and over and over again, because we have people in San Francisco who are getting 5150'd 10, 20, 30 times in a year. And they cycle through in these 72-hour holds, and then they clear up, let's say it's drugs, and the judge releases them. And we want to make sure that someone with that kind of pattern, that the county, that we're able to step in and put them into, whether it's housing with services or a facility or something where we can get them healthy again, even if they are incapable of making that decision for themselves.
That decision to order someone to take away their right of choice, there's a lot of resistance to that. Well,
it's a serious issue. When you talk about conservatorships, it is temporarily stepping in on someone's civil liberties. The city will then become the entity that makes decisions for them for a period of time. In California, we have very strict due process around putting someone in a conservatorship. You're entitled to a judge. It can be a jury. You get a right to an attorney. It gets evaluated periodically. So we don't just sweep people off the streets and put them in a conservatorship. It's very monitored.
Right, but even if your law passes, the system is going to be tremendous for doing, it's going to be very difficult to do anything, isn't it? I guess my question, if you boil it down, is, are the safeguards overly safe?
Well, we are, again, we don't want to just have people swept off the streets and have their civil liberties taken away. We want to make sure we're doing it right. And so, yes, is the system cumbersome? It is, and that's intentionally so, because this is very serious, taking away someone's civil liberties. But what we're doing with this bill is to take the current system, which is way too rigid for this population, particularly of people addicted to drugs, and to make it more flexible so that we can look at people's track record. Are you getting 5150 10 or 15 times a year, even if you appear perfectly normal right now?
Do you feel in Sacramento there is a mood for the change, or is you do?
On this bill, there's certainly been opposition from civil liberties groups, the ACLU, disability rights organizations. I totally respect their opposition. That's the role that they play in our society. But this bill and another one like it in the Assembly have flown through with bipartisan support. We got a 35-0 vote, bipartisan vote in the Senate. The other one got a 75-0 vote in the Assembly. People, when I talk to colleagues, even very, very liberal, lefty colleagues, they they get it because they see it in their own. It's not just San Francisco. This is Sacramento and Fresno and LA and San Diego and Orange County. They see people dying on the streets. Their constituents see it, and people are asking, what the heck is going on here? What kind of system do we have where someone can be so clearly in crisis and no one's doing anything about it?
Well, that is the system we've constructed.
Right, and we're trying to reform it.
Do you see, is this a first step?
Well, this is a pilot program to see how it goes. There could be future steps, but we're trying to tread lightly and take this one step and see if it makes change.
Because it is an interesting intersection in our society, or a fork in the road. On one hand, we have one flew over the cuckoo's nest, which is the idea we don't want to institutionalize the other. On the other, we have walking down any street, not only in cities anymore, but also in the suburbs as well. State Senator Scott Wiener, I want to thank you for joining us this morning. This is, like I said, one of the biggest issues facing California and America and one of our societies. Well, welcome back. The recent arrest of what we're calling a rideshare rapist in San Francisco, someone who was here illegally from Peru and is being accused of picking up women and raping them, is once again brought into question the city's and the state's sanctuary laws, whether legitimately or just for political gain. Joining us this morning is Scott Wiener, state senator from San Francisco. What is the intent of the sanctuary laws that we hear so much about, whether it's on the left or the right?
You know, the sanctuary means that we want our immigrant communities to actually be part of our community. We want them to feel comfortable calling the police when they've been victimized by a crime. We want them to feel comfortable going to court, being a witness. And we want to make sure that our law enforcement, local police, are not viewed as arms of ICE. Because if immigrants believe that a police officer is going to deport you, they're not going to report crimes, they're not going to come forward. So that's what it's about. It's about improving public safety. And unfortunately, there's been an attack on sanctuary, which really trying to demonize immigrants as criminals, even though we know that immigrants have lower crime rates than people who were born here.
If that's the case, and if you have a situation like this, however, where someone's accused of a pretty serious crime, and one of the options is we're going to have a court, he's pleading not guilty, we're going to go through the trial, we're going to have all the rights, we're going to have the public defender, or the other option is just shipping them off to ICE and sending them back to Peru or wherever they're from. I don't think the immigrant community is especially embracing of this type of behavior, and they might even support something like that. Is it smart? Is it just, but we're applying the sanctuary standard to that as well, and does that help the cause?
Well, first of all, just to be clear, this guy this guy's a sociopath, and this guy, I don't want this guy deported to Peru so he can rape women there. I want him in prison for the rest of his life. And so even ICE is not saying that they want him not to be prosecuted. They're saying that if he gets released, they want custody to be able to remove him from the country. So I think most of us, I think we can all agree, this guy needs to go to prison, not back to Peru to prey on women there. And the situation here, as I understand it, from what I have heard, he was not in San Francisco custody at some point in the past. It's not like the city had him in custody and didn't honor an ICE request. He's someone who was not in our system at all and then committed these horrific crimes for which he's now being held accountable. And that's how the system should work. Someone commits these crimes, they're held accountable.
Now, the tricky thing with our sanctuary laws is that there are crimes for which you're accountable and you can be sent to ICE, and then there are others that include things like, well, drug trafficking and such, which are nonviolent, which come under the sanctuary ordinance. Now, I don't believe that immigrant communities want drug dealers on the streets any more than anybody else does. Are we protecting, at the price of protecting everyone, are you doing damage to the goal of protecting the immigrant community and to the public relations nationally on the entire issue?
Well, what we want overall is overall safety. And if we have a situation where people think that interacting with the criminal justice system means you're going to get deported or you're going to get separated from your kids, people aren't going to report crimes. But for violent crimes in particular, the sanctuary is not a blanket policy. There are exceptions, and we want to make sure we're protecting communities. But we also want to make sure that our criminal justice system does not become an arm of federal immigration enforcement. And that's what it's about.
Right. But in the process of doing that, I guess my question is this. Are you going to be sucked into, repeatedly by the Trump administration, of being able to point to things where a lot of people would say, I don't want that person around, and you are in a situation of defending behavior for the greater that could be hurting politically?
Sure. When you have a malicious president who is bound and determined to cherry pick around immigrants, and anytime you have an immigrant who does something bad, we're all human beings, whether you're born here or you're an immigrant, and there are people who do bad things. And so if you have a president who's bound and determined to cherry pick, oh, this immigrant did something bad, so therefore let's deport 11 million people, and let's separate kids from their parents.
The flip to that is, if you've got an immigrant that said, who's not here legally, and they did something bad, why not, as you in the sanctuary movement, say, yeah, get them out of here? That would reinforce your case, rather than saying, no, we have to defend everyone.
And you can often do that. And that even under California's law, even under San Francisco's law, there are exceptions that allow for that. And by the way, ICE can deport whoever they decide they're going to deport. They have that power. This is not about depriving ICE of whatever power they have. This is about saying we in San Francisco are not going to become an arm of ICE. That's all we're saying.
Right. And in response, the Trump administration is San Francisco's doing this, and it becomes a national issue.
Well, Donald Trump loves using San Francisco as a political football, but I'm proud of our values.
Okay, and we'll see how they play out. State Senator Scott Wiener on another one of the biggest topics facing America today.